I'm Elion from Old World Auctions, and today I want to talk to you about how to take a map or any other piece of art out of a frame. The reason that this is important is because anything that was framed prior to around 1980 was likely not done using archival materials or proper framing techniques. So anything, if you don't know when it was framed, chances are there could be things hidden inside the frame that can be damaging your map or your artwork, and that's why it's important to take it out. We find in the map trade that frames actually cause more damage to maps than almost anything else that we see. So that's why we always recommend to our clients, if they don't know when the map was framed or they don't know what materials were used or techniques, that they have the map removed. This is an example of one of the reasons that we recommend that people take their items out of frames. As you can see here, the paper has significantly browned, which has also caused this map to brown. And you can see by lifting this up that there has certainly been some damage caused. We also find here in the corners that the map has been taped down using tape that is not archival and has caused the map to actually stain in the corners where it was taped. So that is a great showing of why it's important to remove these items from frames to ensure that they were done properly before leaving them in there for extended periods of time. The primary tools that I use are diagonal cutting pliers, needle nose or long nose pliers, and a surgical knife. If you don't have a surgical knife, you can actually get them on Amazon relatively inexpensively, or you can also simply use a regular box cutter. And I always like to have a bowl or something to keep all of the pieces in that I'm going to be removing from the frame. All right, so the first step, I typically like to have something underneath my frame so that it doesn't scratch my surface. When you flip it over, the first thing you're going to want to do is remove the wire. And so this is where the pliers come in handy. I usually will just snip them off. On both sides. And get that out of the way. You can also unscrew these hooks on either side, but it isn't necessary. So you need to cut along the paper to be able to see what is going on behind the frame and to understand what you need to remove. So what you can see is along the edge, you can see where the edge of the frame actually is, and it will be a nice straight edge. And so that's where I use my surgical knife or box cutter, and you want to just lay it right up along the edge and kind of push gently, and you can really feel where the edge of that frame is. So you're staying really close to the edge of that frame and cutting all along it all the way around. Once you have your paper cut off, you can then remove it and set it aside, and then you will see the pieces that are holding your frame together. Sometimes instead of having a piece of paper glued to the back of the frame, they will actually glue an entire mat board to the back, such as in this example. In those situations, instead of trying to cut it off because it's a thicker material, you're literally just going to want to try to pull up an edge, and you're going to have to pry it off and rip it off. It's not very pretty, but that is really the only way to reveal the fasteners underneath in order to remove them. So you just have to go around the edge and rip it off. Here we have nails, and when I have nails, I really like to use the diagonal cutting pliers, as they are really good at being able to pull those out and grabbing the heads of the nails. All right, so you're gonna take your diagonal pliers and you're gonna try to grasp with the very tip of them the head of the nail and gently work it out of the frame. So you can see there, I've pulled that one out. They come out usually relatively easily. It depends on the type of wood. So you might have to wiggle it a little bit to pull out the nail. And you just keep going all the way around until you've removed all of the nails. It's important to take all of the nails out. If you don't get all of them out and you try to remove your artwork, you can end up cracking the glass, which you want to avoid. Sometimes instead of nails, you'll get these staples. Now with the staples, I prefer to use the long nose or needle nose pliers because I found in the past the diagonal cutting pliers will sometimes cut through the staple instead of pulling it out because it is a thinner metal. So with the pliers, you can simply grab one end and pull the staple out. And usually you want to pull it away from the frame. So pull it in the direction that it was, or I suppose the opposite direction. Is easier to do it than trying to pull it towards you is much harder to get a grip. So you want to get behind it and pull it out just like that. Some frames you'll find have the backing paper actually glued to the mat board itself instead of just the frame. In these situations, you can't peel it up. It's really stuck down and it doesn't reveal where the different fasteners are, such as the nails. So in this situation, you really have to find them with your sharp edge. So I will go around the edge of the frame, and as I'm going around, you first want to kind of cut the edge, and then when you go back a second time, you can actually feel when you come across a nail. So here I can't move the knife any further, therefore I know there is a nail there. So I will take my pliers right where I found that nail, and you can just dig in and actually find the nail head underneath the paper. So it's a little bit of a search and a find, but you can find them if you go right around the edge with your sharp edge. Once you have all of the nails removed from the edge of the frame, you can go ahead and take out your artwork. So there are two ways you can do this. One, you can just grasp the corner and lift it up. The other way is sometimes if the backing board is really tightly fit inside the frame, you may need to lift up the frame and push gently from the glass side to push the artwork out of the frame. So those are the two ways that you can get your artwork out of the frame. Another situation that can occur is if the hanging attachment for the wire extends beyond the frame itself. You see it's actually extending on top of the backing. You will need to remove it completely before trying to remove your artwork out of the frame. So you would just take a screwdriver and simply unscrew it to remove it. Now that you have your artwork out of the frame, you may want to remove it from the matting. We often recommend to our customers to go ahead and ship the map to us directly in the matting because sometimes it can provide extra support if they're shipping it flat. But if you do have a really large item, you may want to go ahead and remove it from the matting, or if you're wanting to reframe it in something else. So usually a mat, you can simply lift it open. Sometimes they will be sealed along the edge with tape, and so you'll have to pry it open a bit. Then once you have the map out, it's often attached using hinge tape. So you can see that's the proper way of attaching it. So this one was done very well. And now we need to cut along the hinge tape to release the map. So this is where having a surgical knife is really helpful because you can get a very precise cut, whereas a box cutter will typically not give you as nice of a clean cut. So I will always cut directly along the edge of the paper, trying not to cut any of the paper itself. Typically there is a piece of tape, essentially that is taped to the back of the map or art, and then another piece that attaches that tape then to the map board. So I can simply cut directly along this line here. And you can see then that I can check to make sure that it is fully released, and then I can lift it up. You may also encounter maps that are framed in metal instead of wood, and these have a different mechanism on the back, but they are relatively simple to remove. So let me show you how. So if you see on the back here, the sides of the frame are connected with these angled brackets that are secured using screws. And so you would need to use your flathead flathead screwdriver to unscrew these. So we just take them out like this. It's just a small piece. And you will do that on all four corners of the frame. Once you have all four corners, or at least three corners unscrewed, you can pull apart the frame. The one thing you'll want to be careful about is that these little springs are inserted along the edges and they can really pop out as you are pulling it apart. So you just want to be careful about that. You can use your long nose pliers to pull those out once they are a little bit more visible. So as you can see here, I'm just going to gently pull this out. And here these two springs popped out immediately. And you just continue all the way around until you've released your artwork. I hope that these tips have been helpful and will help you take some of your precious items out of frames to ensure that they have been done properly. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment and we will do our best to answer your questions. And as a final reminder, anytime you are working with a frame that has glass in it, you want to be very careful not to cut yourself because the edges of the glass will be very sharp. And again,